Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. And also, the Search for the Ancient Bauble Kickstarter has launched, so make sure you go check that out. The Kickstarter campaign will last for 30 days, and after that, the playmat will no longer be available for purchase. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. Today's episode comes to you courtesy of my incredible patrons. Once a month, patrons vote on what commander that they want to see in an upcoming episode. The commander that gets the most votes wins. And the commander that they selected for this month is Beledros Witherbloom. Beledros is a 4/4 flying elder dragon that costs 5 black-green. She has, at the beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 black and green pest creature token with, when this creature dies, you gain 1 life, and also pay 10 life, untap all lands you control, activate only once each turn. So Beledros Witherbloom is an absolute beast for multiple reasons. First off, she can make you an absurd amount of tokens. Keep in mind that it says at the beginning of each upkeep, not just your own. So with each tripper on the table, you're getting a total of 4 pests. And again, if a pest or 2 happens to die, you gain some life. And having extra life is going to come in really handy because being able to pay 10 life to untap all your lands is huge. You can essentially double up the amount of mana that you have access to in a turn. And actually, although it does say activate only once each turn, there are certain ways around this. So if you've got those ways available to you and you've got the life, you can even triple the amount of mana that you've got access to in a turn. So yeah, you can do some pretty incredible things with this commander. So you can win by making a ton of tokens and make them even deadlier, and you can win by casting some giant spells as well. Again, Beledros is definitely a threat to be reckoned with. So now let's talk about some cards that can help you set yourself up for success with this commander. First up, let's talk about some ways to take advantage of all those pests that you're going to be making with cards like Shamanic Revelation, Village Rites, and Plumb the Forbidden. Shamanic Revelation says, draw a card for each creature you control, and it's got Ferocious, you gain 4 life for each creature you control, power 4 or greater. So this card can draw us an absurd amount of cards and also gain us a ton of life if we can pump our pests. But again, even if we're not gaining life with this though, that's really not that big of a deal. The important part again is drawing an absurd amount of cards for just 5 mana. And of course, we've got plenty of other ways to gain life in this deck, including just, losing our pests. And we can actually utilize those pests to draw cards in a different way with something like Village Rites. Village Rites lets us sacrifice a creature to draw 2 cards. We're going to have plenty of pests that we can just use as fodder for spells like this. And then a similar yet bigger spell than this is Plumb the Forbidden. It says, as your cost to cast this spell, you may sacrifice 1 or more creatures. When you do, copy this spell for each creature sacrificed this way, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. So basically, sacrifice any number of pests that we control to draw a card for each one. And although normally this would cost us life, again, when we sacrifice a pest, we gain life, so it just cancels out. And on top of that, of course, we've got some aristocrat-style ways to benefit from our creatures dying. And one of those ways is extremely good in this deck, and it has earned the title of the Golden Pig, which is the number 1 card out of our 99. And the Golden Pig for this deck is Moldervine Reclamation. It's an enchantment for 3 black-green. It says whenever a creature you control dies, you gain 1 life and draw a card. Again, with this deck, we're going to have access to a ton of creature tokens that essentially benefit us when they die already. With this in play, not only do we gain 2 life instead of 1 now whenever one of our pests dies, but we also draw a card. So essentially, with Beledros in play, with each trip around the table again, we are getting 4 pests. And now those 4 pests essentially equal 4 cards drawn and 8 life gained. That is an absurd amount of value. This essentially helps the deck do exactly what it wants to do in the best of ways. It is the perfect engine for this deck, and that's what makes it the Golden Pig. Now, to truly make this great though, we need some sacrifice outlets that allow us to sacrifice those pests on demand. So of course, we're going to be including some great ones like Viscera Seer, Woe Strider, and Vampiric Rites. Viscera Seer says sacrifice a creature, scry 1. And then Woe Strider does the same, but it also brings with it a goat token because that's a thing, and it also can escape from our graveyard and come into play bigger. And although scrying isn't card advantage, it is card selection. So this can help us get rid of dead draws off the top of our library so we can draw into some more useful things. But then we've got Vampiric Rites, which isn't a free sacrifice outlet, but it can provide a lot of value. It says pay 1 and a black, sacrifice a creature, you gain 1 life and draw a card. So this gives us the same benefits of Moldavine Reclamation, but it is a sacrifice outlet on top of that, but we do have to pay for it. Regardless, gaining more life and drawing more cards are fantastic ways to benefit this deck. And outside of sacrificing our pests, there's also times that we actually want to sacrifice our commander. Now, why would we actually want to do that? Well, let's move on and find out. Cards such as Malakir Rebirth, Supernatural Stamina, and Undying Evil can be fantastic in a deck like this. Malakir Rebirth says choose target creature, you lose 2 life until end of turn, that creature gains. When this creature dies, you return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. Supernatural Stamina says until end of turn, target creature gets +2/+0 and gains. When this creature dies, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. And Undying Evil gives target creature undying until end of turn. So essentially, these are all ways to basically get any of our creatures back if they're about to die. And again, with those sacrifice outlets available to us, we can essentially determine that to be, well, whenever we want. So we can activate our commander's ability to pay 10 life and untap all of our lands. Then we cast one of these targeting our commander, we sacrifice it, and it comes back. And when it comes back, it's treated as a new permanent, so we can activate that ability again. So yeah, there are some ways of getting around that activate only once each turn. Now, yes, that does cost us 20 life, but come on, 20 life is nothing in a game of Commander. And again, with this deck, there are plenty of ways for us to gain that life back. And of course, doubling, and in this case, tripling our mana on one turn can of course be game-ending. Especially when we've got some mana doublers in play like Heartbeat of Spring and Dictate of Karametra. Heartbeat of Spring says whenever a player taps a land for mana, that player adds 1 mana of any type that land produced. And Dictate of Karametra does the exact same thing, but it has flash. Yes, these mana doublers will help our opponents, but again, with our commander's ability, they're going to help us out a lot more. So with these, we've already doubled up our mana, and then by activating our commander, we essentially double it again. And again, if we can activate our commander another time, it gets even more ridiculous. I mean, just as an example, let's say that we're at 8 lands and we've got our commander in play. We tap for 16 mana, we pay 8 life, we untap our lands, we tap for another 16 mana, and now we're at 32. If we've got a way to freely sacrifice our commander and then, use one of those 1 mana spells to immediately get it back and then untap again, we're going to be at an absurd amount of mana. By my calculations, 47 mana in that turn? 1 taken off 48 because you used it on the spell. Anyways, a lot. There are plenty of ways to win from there, and if you don't have a way to win from there, well, a card like Horizon Stone can come in really handy. It says if you would lose unspent mana, that mana becomes colorless instead. So essentially this allows you to store your mana and bank it for later, which comes in really handy because again, you can activate Beledros on any turn. So at that point, you really don't even need a way to, sacrifice Beledros and bring it back into play. As long as you've got the life for it, you can activate on your opponent's turns and then add more mana and then save it for later. And speaking of more mana, big X spells such as Animus Awakening and Kamal's Druidic Vow can come in really handy as well. Animus Awakening says reveal the top X cards of your library, put all land cards from among them onto the battlefield, tap, and the rest of them on your library in a random order. It also has Spell Mastery. If there are 2 or more instant and/or sorcery cards in your graveyard, untap those lands. And then Kamal's Druidic Vow says look at the top X cards of your library. You may put any number of land and/or legendary permanent cards with converted mana cost X less among them onto the battlefield, put the rest in your graveyard. Essentially, each of these can get a ton of lands off the top of your library right into play. So yeah, things can get really out of hand with a commander that can untap your lands. And of course, you can really make use of that mana and actually that life loss with cards like Profane Transfusion and Soul Conduit. Profane Transfusion says 2 target players exchange life totals. You create an XX colorless horror artifact creature token where X is the difference between those players' life totals. So with Beledros, you can get your life down pretty low and then you can just punish someone else and switch lives with them. Oh yeah, and on top of that, you can get a giant creature out of it as well. But Soul Conduit might be even better because it's a repeatable effect. It has pay 6 and tap it, 2 target players exchange life totals. So you can repeatedly get your life total low and then swap it with someone else. Not only does it get your life total back up, but it can also help you take that player out. And speaking of taking players out, let's talk about some cards like Nadir's Nightblade, Marauding Blight Priest, and Dina Soul Steeper. Nadir's Nightblade says whenever a token you control leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So again, our commander is going to be making a ton of creature tokens that we're more than happy to sacrifice, so yeah, now we can gain even more life and drain our opponents out. And then Marauding Blight Priest and Dina Soul Steeper have the exact same text. They say whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. So now whenever we gain life from anything, including our pest dying, we're going to be draining our opponents out. On top of that, Dina is also a sacrifice outlet. She has pay 1 and sacrifice another creature. Dina Soul Steeper gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X the sacrifice creature's power. Now, Dina gaining power isn't all that important, but having an extra sacrifice outlet out there that can also drain our opponents is. Speaking of which, we've also got Lampad of Death's Vigil. It has pay 1, sacrifice a creature, each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. So this is a sacrifice outlet that we do have to pay for as well, but it can drain our opponents out. And of course, we're going to be running those Zulaport Cutthroat type cards like Zulaport Cutthroat that say whenever it or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. You know, aristocrat-style goodness that drains opponents out incredibly quickly. Even a card like Defiant Bloodlord can come in really handy in a deck like this. It says whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. So of course this works well with our pests and our other life gain synergies, but it works best with our life swap cards. Let's say that we're at 10 and someone else is at 40. If we use something like Soul's Conduit to swap life totals with them, we end up at 40 and they end up at 10. So yes, we gained 30 life, and now with this we can make someone else lose 30 life. And if it's that player we swap life totals with, they are very, very dead. So yeah, in a deck like this, we've got plenty of ways to generate absurd amounts of mana and plenty of ways to take players out. But now it's time for me to give you my final thoughts on this commander. Beledros Witherbloom can provide you with an absurd amount of value. Again, being able to create a pest on each upkeep is already an incredibly fantastic effect. But on top of that, and perhaps more importantly, you can untap your lands essentially for free. Okay, technically not free. What I mean by free is you don't have to actually pay for it. There's no mana that you're paying for, you're just paying life, which again is a resource that you've got a lot of and you can get even more of in a deck like this. Regardless, this is an incredibly powerful commander and it can easily dominate a table once it gets going. And with that, the show has come to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thank you again and have a good one.